Well, good evening, everyone, and I'm glad you are all here and made it through all the congestion and the traffic. And I'll introduce myself now. So I am Joanne Query, and I am a member of 2nd CRC, so I certainly welcome you here, and there are some of our members here who will welcome also this town hall. I also serve as co-president of the Holland League of Women Voters, along with Christine Baker. And Christine couldn't be here this evening, otherwise she would be here with me. But we have quite a few of our league ladies here, and we just welcome you, and we're so thankful for the collaboration that we're able to have in Ottawa County with the Holland League of Women Voters, because it allows all of us to have really rich experiences, so we're become very knowledgeable with our new voting guidelines and protocols, and then we can share that information then with others. So with that, welcome, and I will pass this along then. And I believe Jim Dana's coming up.
Thank you, Joanne, and thanks to all of you. I'm with Julie Davey from D9. I'm a member of the steering team of On Track, and I want to tell you a little about what we are about. So I'm going to read this. You can see it on the stand at the back table too. It's On Track is a grassroots, multi-partisan political action committee formed to encourage and empower individuals to be actively engaged in democratic processes. We provide information and resources for civic engagement in Ottawa County and the North Ottawa Tri-Cities area. So just a quick rundown of our history, which is relatively recent. We started in July of 2023 with 10 of us meeting together, and we started meeting weekly. In September, we formed a PAC, so we are a political action committee. As of today, we have 563 members. Besides a steering team to provide direction and oversight, we have 7 committees that are active. An education committee, elections, fundraising, communications, monitoring, membership, and social. So there are lots of ways to be involved, and I invite all of you to take a look at getting actively involved with On Track, because we're going to be very involved through the election season. We have a matching grant. I'll just mention this too. If you can't be actively involved, or even if you are, one of the things we do is we collect money, because it costs money to do the things we need to do during the election season. And we happen to have a matching grant challenge going on right now, and you can find more about that at the table if you want to do that. So here's Julie from District 9.
I'm Julia Davey from Organized District 9, which is the District 9 equivalent of On Track, and they really helped us get started, so many thanks to them for helping us get organized. We have the same mission as On Track, and that is to help restore good governance to Ottawa County. Our district consists of Robinson Township, Grand Haven Township, and Precinct 5 of Spring Lake Township. So there's a little tiny bit across the river. We have a similar structure to On Track. We have similar committees, and we are very active. We're going to have a lot of things going on in the next few weeks. We're going to have house parties where you can come and learn about what's been going on in Ottawa County. We're going to have sign parties where you can just drive by and pick up a sign for candidates and go on your merry way. That will make it an easy way for you to get those. We are going to be evaluating the candidates that are running for the different offices in our districts, and we will be creating a voter guide to help you understand who we recommend after we've evaluated the candidates. If you want to get involved, the best way is to go to the Organized Ottawa website, and they are a county-wide database, and you put your information in and they will funnel your name to your correct organization in your district. So thank you all for coming. We're very excited to have this presentation. The steering committee met yesterday, and these are people that are very involved and have been very involved in this from the beginning. And we think we know what's going on, and we were talking about, well, no, what happens with early voting? When is that? And where is that? And what about this absentee ballots? When did they go out? And how do you get, and we were all very confused. So we're all like, thank goodness we have this tonight. There are certain members of my steering committee in the audience who are tasked with asking questions, if that's gonna happen. Certain questions that yesterday we went, I don't know. That's your job tomorrow night. So thank you, League, for being here and presenting us with this important information.
All right, so Barb and I are the presenters. She'll be up in a minute. And I'm Paula Edwards, and I'm the co-chair of Voter Services for League of Women Voters Holland area. And just want to know a little bit about who's in the audience. So how many of you are members of the District 9 or On Track organizations? Wow, lots of you. Awesome. And how many are members of the League? Quite a few. Great. Well, welcome anybody who's not members of any of these organizations. Do we have any clerks or election workers here? Are you an election worker or a clerk? Okay. Yeah, great. You can help us answer questions. And then, just for awareness, are most of you generally familiar with the new voting laws and just want to refresh, kind of? Anybody like really unfamiliar? Okay, well, that'll help us to kind of gear the presentation. And then, is there anyone here who does not vote in Ottawa County? Because we're really geared toward Ottawa County in this presentation, so. Okay, fantastic. Well, I'll hand it to Barb, who will talk a little more about the League.
And I wanted to point out also that we brought a map of the county that's over here, and you can tell where the districts are. So if you're unsure about any of that, please feel free to look at that. We take it to all of our events in the summer, and it's very interesting to have people stop and say, no, this is where I live, so what district am I in? So that's part of our education as well. So a little bit about the League before we get started with the presentation. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 when women got the right to vote. And since then, still is, the focus is on helping people learn about elections, about voting, and encouraging people to vote. So just like we're doing tonight, our goal is to educate voters. We're going to be sponsoring lots of activities throughout the summer, town halls like this one where you learn about voting rights, but also opportunities to meet the candidates, learn about the candidates. So be watching for those. You can look at our website and the Grand Haven Facebook page, and you'll learn about that. And I'm sure your organizing committees will be advertising as well. The League is a nonpartisan organization. That means we do not endorse candidates, we do not oppose candidates. Our goal is to provide voters with information and opportunities to hear and see the candidates so they can decide who they want to vote for. Membership in the League is open to both women and men. Interesting, we've been at the high schools recently, and we have young men who come up and say, well, do you have to be a woman to vote or to register? Because we've been doing voter registration. So there are two leagues in our area, the Grand Haven and the Holland League, and we're really glad to be able to work together with the Grand Haven League. It helps us reach a lot more voters. So, okay, I have to make sure I'm doing this right. Okay, so in Prop 2020 in 2022 passed, it really strengthened the voting rights in Michigan by making them part of our Constitution. And we kind of think of it as a toolbox, and that's why the tools are over here. In a toolbox, you have your tried and true tools, like a hammer. Well, we have voting rights that we've had for years. They're still here, but now they're part of the Constitution, so they're protected. And then we have some that have been enhanced, like a power drill. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the enhancements to voting rights. And then I had a robot, but now I have this, it's supposed to stand for a robot. We have brand new rights that are now part of the Constitution. So we'll talk about each of these in our presentation. These are some of the tried and true voting rights that you've had, but they're now part of the Constitution, so they're protected. Things like no reason absentee balloting, pre-register when you're 17 and a half, and the fundamental right to vote. Then we have some that are enhanced. So these are rights we've had, but now they've gotten a little bit better. Certification of election results is the process for certifying them has been strengthened, and the absentee voting has had some improvements, one of them being prepaid postage. We'll talk more in detail about these throughout the program. And then we have some new robotic voting rights. And probably the most, I don't know about important, but the newest one is the early voting. And we'll talk a lot about this. There's also some other ones that are brand new. So this is our agenda for tonight. We'll talk about each of these voting rights. And the first one up is the fundamental right to vote. And Paul is going to do this one.
All right, allergy season, so gotta have my water next to me. All right, so the fundamental right to vote. First, we'll just do a quick review of what that is. And so the Proposal 2 did allow us to capture the fundamental right to vote in the Constitution, and that's, of course, the right for, if you are registered, to cast a ballot in each election. And requirements are simple. For those who can register to vote, you can vote if you are a U.S. citizen. If you've been a resident of Michigan, you can vote in Michigan if you've been a resident of Michigan for at least 30 days. And at least 18 years of age on election day. And then the final qualification is that you're not currently serving a sentence on election day. So the right also prohibits people from interfering with or unreasonably burdening the fundamental right to vote, and that could be through an act of law, for example, like fees and taxes and tests that people used to have to take in order to vote. So that is, captured in our Constitution. That's illegal. And through harassment, threats, and intimidation. And if you do feel as though you've been threatened or intimidated, there is a hotline, Promote the Vote, staffs that hotline with lawyers. So if you feel that you've been threatened, you could call that hotline, 866-OUR-VOTE, and the lawyer would talk you through whether you have a reason to press charges or not. Any questions about the right to vote? Nope. Okay. So next up is voter identification, and we have had the same voter ID laws since 1996. And so the difference again is that this has been captured in our Constitution. And so acceptable photo IDs to show to a poll worker if you decide to vote in person are the following: Michigan driver's license or a Michigan state ID, a driver's license from any other state, but that has to be a current driver's license, so somebody who has just moved to Michigan, a U.S. passport or federal government ID, military or tribal photo ID, local government ID is a new one, you see the little robot there, and that's a city or a township photo ID, and then a student photo ID from a school or a university, that's also a new one. The driver's license, the Michigan driver's license can actually be expired. There are a lot of people who have decided that they're not going to drive anymore, but they still have a driver's license. They can hang on to that expired license and use it as their ID at the voting place, but that's the only one that can be expired on this list. Everything else has to be current. So, as has been true for several years now, you go into a polling place and you fill out an application to vote. And you take that application to the poll worker, and the poll worker asks you if you have a picture ID. And if you do have a picture ID, you must show it. There is an exception to that rule. There are several reasons why somebody might not have the appropriate ID at the time that they go to the polls. And it could be like, you know, your purse was stolen, so you don't have your ID, or you lost it, or you simply forgot it. And so you can go into the polls, and on the back side of that application to vote is an affidavit of voter not in possession of picture ID. When you sign that, you're attesting to your identity, and it's under penalty of perjury. So if anybody lies on that, it's a pretty serious offense. Any questions about voter ID rights? All right, oh, yes.
How is that confirmed if I didn't have my driver's license and I affirmed that? Does anybody confirm that later, or do they just...
If you have your driver's license, but you say you don't?
Yeah, I don't have the ID, but I say I don't have a pictured ID, but I sign that.
So you're signing that affidavit.
So does the county or township or something confirm that? How?
Yeah, the clerk can compare that signature and all of the voter information to the records on file. All right, anything else? Yes.
So if my driver's license gives my full name, my middle
Yes.
name also,
Yes.
do I have to sign it with my middle name? Or can I use my initial? Because I do.
Yeah, I always sign it the way it shows up on my application or whatever. The absentee ballot application is what I receive. So I look at it, it's like, oh, okay, they used my middle name. I'm going to sign my middle name. I don't really know whether the clerk cares if your middle name is in there or if it's a middle initial or not, because they're looking to make sure that there's a match in your handwriting. So yeah, the middle name might not matter.
Good to know, Mark. I make apology and we did Mark.
All right, any other questions? I'll hand it off to Barb.
Next up, we're going to talk about early voting. So this is one of our new voting rights. Thanks to Prop 2, Michiganders now can engage in true early voting. This is to cast a ballot. Whoops, let me back up again. Okay. So you can actually go to a polling place and cast a ballot just like you would on Election Day. We haven't been able to do that in the past. Before, early voting meant that you would apply for an absentee ballot and receive it, and then you would fill it out and mail it back in or drop it off. So now, in Michigan, you actually have 3 ways to vote. You can vote on Election Day, like you would normally. You can apply for an absentee ballot. You can fill it out. You can take it in. You can drop it off in a drop box, you can mail it in, and now you can actually take it in on an early voting day. So the third way, and this is the brand new one, is that you have the right to vote during the early voting period. So every state, every city and township must offer early voting in state and federal elections, not in local elections, and so we don't have early voting on the election that's coming up next week on May 7th. What did I do? Oh no. Okay, so here you can see the early voting sites offer voting for 9 consecutive days before the election. They have to be open 8 hours a day. It can be consecutive or it can be non-consecutive. And you can find the locations, we'll have a map up in a second, at michigan.gov/vote. They'll have all the early voting sites and the schedule's up 60 days before the election. So what's interesting too is you can apply for an absentee ballot, receive it at home, do your research, fill it out, And you can actually take it in on one of the early voting days and go through the process just like election day. You would request, go in and talk to the poll workers. And before, you would have to give up your absentee ballot. It would be spoiled. You'd be given a new ballot, and you'd have to fill it out right there. Now you don't have to do that. You can take your absentee ballot that you filled out at home, go to the polling site on an early voting day, actually go through the process, and feed that ballot that you filled out at home right into the tabulator, and you get your sticker. So that's a really nice option, I think, because you can do all of your research, learn about the candidates, learn about the proposals, make your decisions, fill out your ballot, and then take it in and get the experience of really turning in your ballot at the voting place. So there has to be an early voting site in each of the locations, but townships can work together. So in Ottawa County, they've made a decision that there are 4 different early voting sites, and you can see them there on the map. Anybody in Ottawa County can vote at any one of these during the early voting period, which is really nice. In Allegan County, each township has their own. So they have their own location at the township office, and they have their own schedule for voting. So that's how, it's going to be different based on what county you live in. So what's the difference between early voting and absentee voting? Early voting is the opportunity to vote in person like you would on election day. The experience is very similar to an election day voting. All of the sites have the same requirements that a polling place would have on election day. They have to be accessible. They have to have the opportunity for the public to observe. The same rules apply to the polling sites during the early voting period. With absentee ballot voting, that's when you request the ballot. It's sent to you, you receive it, you fill it out. You can either send it back in the mail, you can drop it off at a drop box, you can take it to the township office and turn it in. But that's how those two differ. Are there any questions about early voting? Yes?
Don't have a question, but if you have an absentee ballot and you go to early vote, you have to use that absentee ballot. You can't ask for another ballot when you get to the absentee, to the off-site. We had an instance where a couple of people came to vote, early voting, who had been issued an absentee ballot. And that would be like, you've got 2 ballots.
Yeah.
Can't do that. Or one of them said, oh, I ripped it up and threw it away. And then all the voting was.
Don't do that, Tom.
Yeah, so it's fine if you bring it, but don't throw it away or don't expect it to.
Yeah. You want to answer that question?
Oh, it's not a question. She's
Okay.
saying, yeah, you need to bring your absentee ballot in and either spoil it or, in which case you can issue another ballot, or feed it into the tabulator.
Yeah, so you could spoil it there and get a new one. Yeah.
This website disagrees.
What's it say?
It says, and this is a Michigan.gov website, yes, voters can request an absentee ballot submitted prior to election day by mail, in person at their local clerk's office or by Dropbox. Voters who no longer wish to use their absentee ballot and who would prefer to vote early in person should bring their absentee ballot to surrender at their early voting site.
Yeah, that's what we just said.
After surrendering their
Yep.
absentee ballot, a new ballot is issued. It doesn't say you can vote the absentee ballot.
Yeah, you can vote your absentee ballot. You can bring it in, fill out your voter application, and then instead of issuing
Okay,
a
I'm
new
sorry,
ballot.
I didn't continue, sorry.
Okay.
Yep, I see it now.
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
awesome.
I actually did that.
I was
Yeah.
trying to catch up to where you were with the
Yeah.
questions.
No, I tested that out at the presidential primary because I wanted to see how it worked, and it was slick.
February 27th presidential election, okay, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Any other questions? Yes.
If you
have an absentee ballot, another person, say my spouse, can I bring that in and drop that off in person to the clerk? She doesn't have to do that.
Yeah, you can, if you're a close relative like that, you can bring that person's ballot in.
Repeat the question.
Oh,
The question was if can you take your spouse's absentee ballot to the clerk's office to turn it in? And the answer is yes.
But it's very specific to household members, right?
Yes.
Yep, yep.
Yes, close
Yep.
relatives, household members.
Any other questions? Yes.
Does it say anywhere on, when you go in and vote, they have the roll of everyone's names. Does it say anything indicating that they've been sent an absentee ballot?
Yes. Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
When you go in, I'm going to have her answer. You can do it the right way.
Okay, when you go in to vote, they look up your name on the chart, and I wondered if on the chart it indicated if you had received an absentee ballot. And yes.
Yep. I think they actually changed they saw my number and said, okay, now you're this vote number, yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
All right. So another way that Proposal 2 made voting more convenient is by providing the opportunity to sign up for a permanent mail ballot list. So that's what we're talking about, permanent mail ballot lists. So what is it? So previously, you could sign up to always receive an application for an absentee ballot before every election. And then you would fill out that application, send it in, and you would receive your ballot. So now you can submit one application and get a ballot before every election, which can be confusing to people. A lot of people are like, well, I've been on that list for ages, but you've been on the first list. You've been on the application, the absentee ballot application list, if you've been on it for years. And so this is a new right in 2024, and you will not automatically be moved from one list to the other. You do need to check a box on your application, or you need to talk with your clerk in order to be moved. In most cases, before the presidential primary in February, if you were on that list, you probably received something from your clerk saying, do you want to be on the permanent mail ballot list? So a lot of clerks did that, reached out to find out. But if you didn't get that from your clerk, or if you don't know how to sign up, so you do, if you're not on that list, you do need to fill out an application, and that application does have a checkbox that says automatically send me a ballot before each election. Again, you're not automatically transferred, and this is a good choice for people who vote from home all the time. It's not a great choice for students or snowbirds or people who are away for 2 or 3 elections out of the year, because ballots cannot be forwarded. Yep.
So ballot that goes out in the primary,
the ballot that goes out for the primary and the general are different. So, if I'm a permanent one, and I registered as Republican, and I want to change it to Democrat for primary, then I can't be on the permanent list. Is that correct?
In the presidential primary, they sent out 2 separate ballots. You had to request. So in that one case, they did not send out a ballot. They sent out an application that said, do you want a Republican ballot or do you want a Democratic ballot? That was just for the presidential primary. So for all other primaries, and in fact, Michigan is a state where you don't have to be a registered Republican or Democrat to vote a certain way. So you can request a Republican or a Democratic ballot regardless of party affiliation. In the August primary, it's going to all be on one ballot, and there will be one side for Republicans and one side for Democrats. And you have to stay in your lane. And we've got some information on that a little later in the presentation too.
And after the Republican and the Democratic side, beyond all of that is the nonpartisan section.
Yay, yeah, good point. Turn your ballot over. Always turn your ballot
And
over.
I can show you a video, a hilarious video by a former Supreme Court candidate that brings that up. You know what I'm talking about?
I have not seen that video, but
It
it's,
was,
I can, yes.
It was, yeah. It's linked to the West Wing and a former Supreme Court candidate.
Interesting. All right, so if you do plan to, oh, sorry.
Is there another way to request to be put on a permanent absentee ballot other than on a ballot itself?
Not at this time. There may be other opportunities in the future, but right now you just have to check that box on your application. So if you do plan to be away from home during election season, you can request that your clerk send the ballot to your temporary address. But ballots go out 40 days before the election, so you have to be pretty darn aware of when your ballots are going out in order to request that in advance. So that's why it might not be a great choice for people who tend to be away during some elections. So if you move within the state of Michigan, you'll remain on that list as long as you update your Michigan driver's license and your address, you know, your registration address, which if you update your driver's license, you automatically update your registration address. If you move outside the state of Michigan and surrender your Michigan driver's license, obviously you'll no longer be eligible to vote in the state of Michigan, so you'll be removed from that list. There are a few other ways to remove yourself from the list. You can submit a request to be removed. You can move, or if you move outside of the state of Michigan and update your driver's license, you'll be removed from the list. If you move within Michigan without updating your voter registration address, you'll be taken off the list. What happens then is because ballots cannot be forwarded, the ballot will bounce back to your clerk. And the clerk does need to do a little chasing with postcards and saying, have you moved? What's your new address? And if they can't get any response back, then they're going to remove you from the list. And number 4, if you're no longer eligible to vote, for example, if you're incarcerated at the time of the election, or if you don't vote for 6 consecutive years. So the list is secure. The clerks do need to verify your identity in order to get you on that ballot list, and they do that through signature verification, along with all of your other voter registration data. Any questions about the permanent mail ballot list? We did a few during this, so, all right.
Next up, we're going to talk about improvements to the absentee voting. And you can see the drill. So this is a right that we've had, but it's been enhanced through Prop 2. So the biggest, I guess the easiest one to remember is that you now have prepaid postage. So once you get your absentee ballot, you can put it in the mail and you don't have to put a stamp on it. It's prepaid. Then also, the voters have the right to be informed if there's an issue with their absentee ballot. And the most common problem is that people forget to sign the envelope. And you can see that area is circled right there. You have to sign the outside of the envelope when you send your absentee ballot in. But now, you can be notified that you didn't do that and there's a problem, and this is how you fix it. So you'd have to go in and sign it. Also, the state is developing an enhanced tracking system for absentee ballots. So when this is up and running, you'll be able to see when your ballot is received and if there's any problems, what the problem is and how to fix it. And then this probably would be one of the the brand-new voting rights in terms of absentee ballots. Most voters still have the responsibility to get their absentee ballot to the clerk by 8 o'clock on election day. However, now military and overseas voters have to have their ballot postmarked within 6 days of the election, and then their ballot will still count. So, any questions about absentee ballot improvements? Yes?
On that military, on the part about the military that they have 6 days, does that mean that then they have to wait 6 days to certify elections?
That's a great question. The Board of Canvassers can meet, but the election results cannot be certified for 6 days. And we had a clerk at one of our town halls earlier, and they had, like 1 or 2 ballots that came in, and so after the 6 days, they could certify. Great question.
It's usually a very small quantity.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. We're going to learn about drop boxes.
All right. So a little enhancement on Dropbox laws. So first of all, what is it? It's a secure, locked box where you can drop your absentee ballot applications or absentee ballots. And the new regulations are that every city and township must have at least one drop box, and it must be accessible and kind of located in a place that's centrally located to that city or township. And for larger cities, and this is where it's a really important enhancement, they need to have one drop box for every 15,000 voters, and they must be distributed equitably and also, accessible for those with disabilities. So in Grand Haven and Grand Haven Township, you're going to have one location in Grand Haven with 2 drop boxes, one in front of City Hall, one behind City Hall. In Grand Haven Township, you'll have one drop box located at the Grand Haven Clerk's Office or the Township Hall. And if you don't live in Grand Haven or Grand Haven Township, you can go find your Dropbox location at michigan.gov/vote. So which Dropbox do you use? You have to use the Dropbox that's within the jurisdiction where you vote. So if you vote in the city of Grand Haven, you need to use that Dropbox in order to return your ballot and get it to the correct clerk. You can't drop it in the Grand Haven Township Dropbox, for an example. The clerks are really nice about it, though. If you do drop it in the wrong box, they often will try to get it to the correct clerk. But on election day, it makes it really hard for them to do that, and so your vote might be thrown away if you get it into the wrong box close enough to the election that the clerk can't get it distributed. Yes?
So is that the precinct where you live in?
Yes, in the jurisdiction where you're registered and where you vote. Yeah.
So in Robinson Township, there isn't a drop box?
There should be.
There should be.
Yeah, I just looked up Grand Haven's.
Oh, just get
since we're here, yeah. So yeah, if you're not in Grand Haven, go to that.
Michigan.gov,
Yeah.
It's at the Township Hall.
Oh, okay, somebody knew that. Township, Julie, was that you? Yeah, Township Hall.
The county clerks, on the My Iowa website, there is a service of the county clerk to not only look up and see the address where you vote for every precinct, where your drop box is located, but once your ballots are printed, it will show you your ballot ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just online.
Yeah, it's awesome. We also, we're going to highlight Vote 411 at the end of this too, where we show the same stuff, but then we also interview candidates and have them answer questions, and so you can look at what your candidates have to say about themselves, if they answer our questions. All right, so when are drop boxes accessible and available? They're available 24/7 for the 40 days prior to an election. That's when the absentee ballots go out. And up to 8 p.m. on election day. And they are secure. They need to be locked, bolted down, tamper-proof, and only authorized election officials can get the ballots out of those drop boxes. And most in Ottawa County are subject to video surveillance. By January of 2026, all drop boxes in Michigan need to be subject to video surveillance. Any questions about drop boxes? Yes?
Were all the drop boxes, will they all look the same and be uniform, or
Not necessarily.
depends on your community then?
Yeah. But they're all clearly labeled. And most of them are outside because they have to be accessible 24/7. So they might be right outside your clerk's office.
Are they not all now approved by the state?
That I don't know.
I think that happens, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, you would think somebody needs to approve the design of
I
them.
think you can source them through the state.
Yeah, that would make sense because they have to meet these these specifications. Yes?
Is video surveillance only for the 40 days, or is it all year long?
Well, they probably mount the video camera all year long, but yeah, I think they probably pay attention to the surveillance. David is looking that up right now. No, you're not. I don't know if it's under surveillance all the time, but yeah, certainly during those 40 days.
Oh, it's a different box.
Indeed.
A different box.
Yes.
What security measures are now in place to make sure that ballots are not tampered?
If they're associated with a Dropbox or just in general?
In general.
In general?
When they go through ballots.
You mean like in an election office, if somebody in the office?
Right.
There are so many regulations and requirements for how you have to account for every single ballot. And there are lots of checks and balances after the election too. So, and you can help me talk about this. I mean, it's amazing the hoops we have to jump through to make sure that an election is accurate. You know what? Justin Roebuck, the clerk, invites people to these the recounts that he does, or the spot checks that he does. You should go visit at some point.
He has a secure room where he brings the ballots.
Yeah, the ballots are always kept secure, and nobody's messing with those ballots. They're secured, they're locked down.
So this is undergone considerable upgrade since the last election.
The last election was very secure as well. So, yeah. Okay, you're welcome. All right, what's coming up?
Just a little bit of a follow-up. On those early voting days, they also have to put all of the ballots in a secure, locked box, and they have to be in a locked room. And since we have an election next week, you might be interested in observing the Board of Canvassers. They meet right after the election, and some meet on the Wednesday, some meet on the Thursday. But anyone can go and observe the Board of Canvassers. It's really an educational experience when you see how they check, and they go through the poll books and they check every single township.
You can sign up to be a poll watcher too, in which case you can watch what's happening at your own precinct and all the checks that they have to do in order to get an election closed down at the end of the day. It's really amazing.
And it really is open. You can go and watch, and it's very educational. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming up because we have an election next week, and then we have a primary in August and a general election in November. So this is the Holland area, and then in Grand Haven.
Grand Haven is down below.
Oh, okay. So in Grand Haven, I think just in this area, it's mostly school district proposals that are on the election next week. And then in August, we have the primary election. Absentee ballots for the primary come out on June 27th, which seems early, but that's when they become available. And then the early voting window begins on July 27th. And in November, for the general election, and the primary is for all the offices except president. And then the general election in November, absentee ballots come out the end of September, September 26th. And then the early voting window begins on October 26th. So as we're working on scheduling candidate forums and candidate meet and greets, we're trying to do most of them in July because people will have gotten their absentee ballots or they'll be available and it'll be that window. So watch for information then.
What was the date on the primary?
The primary is August 6th.
No, when the ballots will be sent?
The absentee ballots are available June 27th.
Oh, okay.
And the early voting window starts July 27th.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So why is it important to vote in a primary election? Well, in an area like this where there's one party that's quite strong and sometimes we don't even have candidates in both parties, whoever wins the primary becomes the winner basically in the November election as well. And it's your opportunity to choose who will be on the November ballot. That's what the primary is all about. In Michigan, and this is really important, you do not need to be a member of a political party to vote in the primary. For example, for the prosecuting attorney, there are two candidates, both Republican. So they'll be facing off in the primary election, and whoever wins that becomes the candidate in the November election, unopposed. And the same thing is true for sheriff. Both candidates are Republicans. So whoever wins in the primary is the only candidate on the ballot in November. So the importance of the primary really can't be emphasized enough. So who gets to vote in a primary? All registered voters. You do not need to choose a party to vote in the primary. However, you do need to vote for only one party. So you have to stay in your lane. And you can see the picture of the ballot over there. You have to either vote the left column or the right column. You can't jump back and forth between the left and the right, between the two parties. In the primary election. In the general election, you can. So here's the differences. In the primary election, Republicans are running against Republicans, Democrats are running against Democrats for their party's nomination. In the general election, each party's candidate is running against the other party's candidates for that office. In the primary, you may only vote for one party across the entire partisan section of the ballot. There might be a nonpartisan, there often is a nonpartisan section. So you just need to pay attention to your ballot and flip it over and see both sides of it. In the general election, like I said, you can split your vote. You can vote for one candidate who's a Democrat, another candidate who's a Republican. You choose who you think would be best for that office. And like we said, in the primary, there may be some nonpartisan offices or proposals, and they are often on the back of the ballot. And in the general election, there probably will be, because there are some offices that are nonpartisan. So, just to kind of sum up, remember there are 3 ways to vote. You can vote early at an early voting site. And I think I didn't mention before, your early voting site might not necessarily be the same, actually in Ottawa County probably won't be, the same as your polling place on election day. on election day, you go to your precinct. But the early voting site, remember in Ottawa County, you have 4 and you can choose which one you want to go to. You can also vote by absentee ballot. Like we said, you can mail it in, drop it off, or you can take it in on an early voting day. And then you can vote in person at your polling place on election day, sometime between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. I'm not sure why that's up there.
Oh, that's weird.
So somebody's email address just kind of interesting. Like Paula said, the League of Women Voters sponsors Vote 411, which is a nonpartisan online voter guide. When you go to Vote 411, you can see your ballot, you can find out if you're registered, you can learn about the candidates. We send questions to all of the candidates for all of the offices and post what they said. We don't edit it, we just print it verbatim. So that's an opportunity for you to find out all that election information that you want. And you can do your voting plan. And then there are other resources as well. The michigan.gov/vote or michiganvoting.org are other places where you can find out information about what's on your ballot. Any questions? Yes?
When kids are graduating and going away to school, they can register for an absentee ballot, but don't they have to vote in person for their very first election?
I think that's changed.
Did they change it? I'm not sure about voting in person at your first. I think you're right about that.
I think so.
Yeah. Is it still the same? They have to vote in person first?
Paula thinks yes.
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah,
this-
I'm
we
not
gotta
sure
get
if
our
that's
kids
changed or
voting
not. Yeah.
before they go to school in August, or they can.
Yeah, you might want to call your clerk and
Okay.
verify that, because I don't know for sure.
Thank you.
Good question. Yes?
The questionnaires that you're sending out to candidates, will those be available before the information be available before the absentee ballots go out?
That's our goal. Right now, we're formulating the questions, and we have to get all of their email addresses, and yes, that's in the works right now.
Will they all answer?
No, they won't. So Vote 411 will say, you know, we contacted them, but there was no response. So I guess that gives you some information too. Yes?
Can you talk about independent candidates, when they will, I understand that they can show up on the November ballot, but not as a primary. Is that true, and how does that work?
Paula?
Yeah, if they're not running against somebody who's of the same party affiliation, they'll show up on the November ballot rather than the primary. The primary is just for people of the same party running against each other for the same seat.
But if there were 2 Green Party candidates, then they would be on the primary ballot. Yeah. And those would probably be more statewide offices, I think. Any other questions?
Which ballot will the Ottawa impact be on? When is that good?
The candidates for all of the Ottawa County Commission seats will be on the August primary.
And in most cases, there is a primary. And maybe 1 or 2 seats there's not, like I think in District 3, there's not a primary. Yeah, but most will have a primary.
Or 4.
Or 4, yeah.
Anything else? Okay, then we just want to thank you very much for coming tonight. And thank you for being engaged. All of these voting improvements could not have happened without engaged people, and people signing petitions and voting for these constitutional amendments. So thank you for being active citizens. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're working. I thought it was.